First of all, I would like to thank the UPF for inviting me and everybody else and all of the distinguished guests who are here because, in my view, probably the next most exciting country in the world is going to be Korea. When we open the 38th parallel, there's going to be enormous change and excitement here. Some of you know that in previous life, I spent 3 years driving around the world. I drove, as you can see, through 116 countries, 250,000 kilometers in 3 years on the road. And I can assure you that gave me the perspective to see that when we open the 38th parallel, this peninsula, this country, is going to be the single most exciting place in the world. You can see I drove 245,000 kilometers. When I got home, or when we got home, I went with my wife, Paige Parker. We were a little tired, as you can imagine, so we stopped to rest for a while. Well, one result of resting for a while is we now have a baby girl. Now, you may wonder why I show this. First of all, I want to tell you that for many decades, I never wanted a child. I thought children were a terrible waste of time, money, energy. I felt so sorry for my friends who had children. You wasted your life. How could you do it? I was wrong. I was completely 100% wrong about children. This little girl came along and changed my life. So I want you to know that if there's anybody here or anybody in the world who hasn't done it, and you're the right age, please, please have a child. You will find out it is so much fun, and it will change your life for the better if you do so. So please, take a day off. Well, maybe don't take a day off these days. Go home for lunch. Have a lunch hour one day, because it will be a wonderful change. I went home for lunch one day with my wife, and we now have another child. I took my own advice. I took my own advice. I don't just tell it. I'm not just telling you this stuff. I act on my advice. I don't just talk about it. And by the way, as you can see, we have another daughter. I know that in Asia, including Korea, you think that boys are better than girls. I want you to know that is wrong. That is 100% wrong. Girls are much, much, much better than boys. So when you go home for lunch, be sure to have a girl. Don't have a boy. You will be much happier with a girl. And please do it for Korea as well. Korea now has one of the lowest birth rates in the world, as you know. Whenever there's prospect of war or economic problems, people don't have babies. But once we open the 38th parallel, there will be a new frontier, a new excitement, new vibrancy, and you will have many, many more babies. I know that in South Korea you've been marrying foreigners. You don't need to do that anymore. There are lots of girls in North Korea, so you can marry Korean girls once again and have Korean girls once you do it. Now, the Universal Peace Federation has done some remarkable things, and I want to show this because I don't think many people, certainly I did not know at one time, how much you have done up there. One of the only car companies in the world, ever in North Korea, was founded by Reverend Moon and the Universal Peace Federation. As you can see, there is a possibility of a tunnel from Japan to Korea. That's not me doing that. That's the Universal Peace Federation. So possibilities do exist for enormous change on the Korean Peninsula and in this part of the world if somebody will just sit down and do something instead of talking about it. The UPF has other initiatives aimed at doing business in North Korea, with North Korea, and as I think most of you know, if people are doing business together, they're probably not going to be shooting each other. They're probably going to be drinking beer and having fun. and making money. So this can happen and will happen. This car company, I doubt if many of you know that the North Koreans ever had a car company. This was founded by Reverend Moon and his supporters, and North Korea actually was producing cars because of the Universal Peace Federation. So change can take place. Enormous change can take place. I'm sure Mr. Kim's grandfather would have hated it if there was a car company in North Korea. But there was, there is, etc. The Universal Peace Federation has also begun. You can see the beginnings of a tunnel there, a tunnel from Japan to Korea, down near Busan. That will have enormous, enormous changes in this part of the world. Can you imagine one day you can get in your car in Tokyo and drive to London? You can drive from Tokyo to London. I want to be the first one. I want to be in the first car to drive from Tokyo to London. But this too will change everything. It cannot happen now because of the 38th parallel. But once the 38th parallel opens, this tunnel will occur, and then there will be enormous increases in travel, commerce, tourism, and everything in the Korean Peninsula. For those of you who are not familiar with this part of the world, as you can see, the peninsula is in a very strategic place in the world with huge neighbors, important neighbors all around it and in the world. I want to show you also, not just will the Korean Peninsula be extremely exciting once we open the 38th parallel. Some of you know about the One Belt, One Road project in China. It's perhaps the most important development in the 21st century so far. 500 years ago, the Spanish and the Portuguese started sailing around the world and changed geography. 200 years ago, the railroad came along and changed geography. Some of you have heard of the city of Chicago in the United States. Chicago is there because of the railroad. So the Chinese are now in the process of changing geography, but Korea will hook into the One Belt, One Road project and the Trans-Siberian Railroad. So the Korean Peninsula, once it's open, will become an extremely exciting and important transportation hub. Many other changes that will take place in the Korean Peninsula once this happens. Remember, we're all going to get in our car in Tokyo and drive to London someday. How does this affect South Korea, which is very important to this negotiation, needless to say? As you can see, South Korea has had great prosperity in the last few decades. Things have been great. People look forward to possibilities of peace in this part of the world. And once it happens, it's going to be even more prosperous and exciting. The Korean currency, the won, has been a stable currency in sharp contrast to many currencies in the world because of the stable economy and the growing economy. Oops. But not all good stories have a good end. You know, Korea has also built up huge amounts of debt in the last 20 or 30 years. Korea is now one of the largest indebted nations in the world. By the way, the largest debtor nation in the world, the largest debtor nation in the history of the world is the United States. So don't think I'm saying bad things about the Koreans. I don't like that the United States is a huge debtor nation, the largest in history, but I have to face facts. But Korea also has been building up a lot of debt. So once we open the 38th parallel, it's going to help enormously because there will be a new frontier. And whenever there's a new frontier, there's excitement and prosperity. But also North Korea doesn't have much debt. So the peninsula as a whole will be in better shape. I mean, nobody will lend money to the Kims. I won't lend money to the Kims, and I doubt if many other people will either. But the overall peninsula debt will be much moderated by opening up. The Korean population has been growing for a long time, but as you can see, the birth rate has collapsed in the last few years in Korea. So we need to open up the peninsula for many reasons. Once we do, once we open the peninsula, I'm not going to use the word unification because it scares a lot of people in the north and the south. But everybody, most people are in favor of this. And once it opens up, you're going to have a new excitement, a new prosperity. You'll have a country of 80 million people on the Chinese border. Everybody, not everybody, but most people would be in favor of this because there'll be a new prosperity, a new excitement. The North Koreans spend staggering amounts of money on defense. The South Koreans spend staggering amounts of money on defense. Can you imagine what could happen if South Korea didn't spend billions on defense? What the North Koreans could do if they didn't spend billions on defense? We could have a big, big party. Where's Julia Moon? Julia Moon could come and dance. We could all have a, Julia, yes, Julia Moon, the dancer. We could have a great party. Julia could bring her dancers. Everybody would have a wonderful, wonderful time because we would have so much money that we're not spending on guns and bullets and killing each other. Everybody alive in the Korean Peninsula today has spent his or her whole life worrying about getting killed. For 80 years, everybody here has been worried about getting killed. Let's stop worrying about that. Let's start putting our energy and all of that money, what we can save, into a new prosperity. It will change Korea, it will change Asia, it will change the world. One other thing I have to show you before I stop. In South Korea, there's been a huge gender imbalance. They like boys instead of girls, so there's a shortage of girls. If we open up, in North Korea, there are a lot of girls. So we have plenty of girls. So the South Koreans can stop marrying foreigners, they can marry Koreans again, and the Korean Peninsula will be the most exciting place in the world. Thank you.